station. This is Houston on Space to Ground 2. Are you ready for the event?
We are ready for the event.
Houston ACR, this is Mission Control. Houston, please call station for a voice check.
Mission Control. Houston, please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Houston ACR. How do you hear me?
Station, this is Houston ACR. How do you hear me?
Station ACR, we have you loud and clear. How us?
We hear you loud and clear. Thank you. Please stand by for opening remarks.
Thank you. Please stand by for opening remarks.
Hey everyone, welcome. This event is hosted by the University of Missouri Pre-Employment Transition Services Program, supporting students as they prepare for careers and independent living. We're excited to kick things off with you today. Let's jump into our first question.
Hi, my name is Casey, and my question is, what is the temperature span in space? And are there any seasons?
The temperature in space is a little bit variable, but it's always quite extreme. It depends on things like how close you are to stars. But here in low Earth orbit, in the environment of the International Space Station, it varies from about negative 250 degrees Fahrenheit when you're in the shade, so when the sun is not shining, to about positive 250 degrees Fahrenheit when you are in the sunlight. So pretty big range there. We don't have seasons in space because the seasons that you're familiar with on Earth, those are actually caused by the tilt of the Earth. And that tilt is about just over 23 degrees. And the tilt changes which hemisphere, if you live in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, whether or not that is facing and getting more light from our sun. So that's what determines the seasons. So here we spin around our planet every 90 minutes, no seasons, but a big variety of temperatures.
Hi, my name is Devin. My question is, I would love to work at NASA someday. In your opinion, what would be the best entry-level job at NASA to get my foot in the door?
Hey, Devin, thanks for the question. That's an awesome aspiration. I'm so excited that you are interested in space and you're interested in NASA, and maybe someday you want to come work here. Most of the advice that I give people that are thinking about finding a job at NASA is to find some aspect of it that they love the most, whether it's flying an airplane or it's human resources or it's doing engineering or you want an internship or you want to work on the team that takes care of the buildings and the facilities. Wherever you want to work at NASA, if you find something that you love to do, that's going to come through, and people are going to be excited to work with you and excited to be a part of your life and around you. So find the piece of the world that you love, find out what part of NASA does that, and that's your best opportunity.
Hi, my name is Stuart. My question is, how is your circadian rhythm system impacted with the multiple sunrises and sunsets per day?
That's a really interesting question, especially for me as a physiologist, and that's my background. And here in the orbit of space, of the low Earth orbit of the International Space Station, like we were just talking about, we're going around the planet every 90 minutes. So this means we actually have 16 sunrises and sunsets per day, which might make your normal 24-hour circadian rhythm kind of 12 on and 12 off of our typical light cycles. It really could kind of make things haywire for us. Most people don't really have a very big disruption of their circadian rhythms, though. You know, we don't have a lot of windows in our daily activities. We have the cupola where we can look out of the window, and we have a few other windows around. So we're actually not really that subject to the shifting light and day throughout the workday. And we have something on the space station that can help shift our circadian rhythms. We have these lights like you see shining on us here in the airlock. We can set those at different intensities to sort of mimic those normal circadian rhythm patterns that we have on Earth to help our systems and make sure that we can still fall asleep when it's nighttime. But actually, most people don't really have that big problems with circadian rhythms. It could have some effect on some of the other things we see physiologically, like disruptions to our immune system, however.
Hi, I am Emmy, And my question is, if you had an empty jar and you opened it up out in space, what would it do? Would there be any effects to the jar, or would it be the same?
Hi, Jimmy. That's a really cool question. I guess it kind of depends on what's in the jar to begin with, and what the jar is made of. In the vacuum of space, if there's air inside the jar before you opened it, all that air pressure inside the jar would be pushing on the sides of the jar and the lid, trying to get out and equalize the pressure against the vacuum of space. So if the jar was strong enough, it would just float there and it would contain the air. But if the jar wasn't strong enough, maybe it could fail and all the air could escape outside. And if it was strong enough and you just started to loosen up the lid, that air would want to escape. And that pressure differential would push on that lid, probably making it a little bit hard to open. But eventually it'd open enough that it would just come shooting off and all that air inside would run out. So if there was no air in the jar to begin with, it would just be the same. It'd be easy to open the jar and nothing would really happen and the jar would kind of float around. So I guess it kind of depends on where you filled that jar up at the very beginning.
Hi, my name is Isabella. My question is, can you see storms, cities, or landmarks from the International Space Station?
We absolutely can. We have such an incredible view from those windows that I was speaking about earlier, and we can see storms. I love seeing lightning storms from up here because you see a totally different vantage point. You're looking down on those thunder clouds, and you see these really big, bright flashes, and you see how big of an area these thunderstorms can cover. At nighttime, when you go over to the cupola and look out, you can distinctly see all of the cities, especially the big cities, because of all of the lights. We like to do a lot of photography through those windows, whether it's day or night. You can see all the differences in the mountains and the snow cover and the forest area. The perspective up here is really breathtaking because you have this perspective that's shifted so far away from the views that we normally have on Earth, and it is absolutely stunning.
Hi, my name is Lauren. My question is, what is your job down here on Earth?
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for the question. Whether we're up in space or down on Earth, we're both astronauts. And so we work in that. We train to come in space when we're on Earth, and we work up in space when we're up here. And that job is pretty diverse. We do everything from fly T-38s to train on the space station systems, to learn how to do medical procedures and other sorts of science experiments that we have to do while we're up here. We also develop new vehicles for the future of space travel. So there's all sorts of interesting things that we get involved with. And one of the neat things is it doesn't really matter what your background is. Whether you come to NASA as an engineer, a scientist, or a pilot, you can get into all of these types of things as an astronaut and kind of learn across the breadth of all the activities that humanity needs to explore while we're in space.
Hi, my name is Sean, and my question is, what made you want to be an astronaut?
I wish I had a great story of one event or something in my life in particular that caused that spark, but my mom tells me when I was 5 years old, I first started saying I wanted to be an astronaut, and I just never stopped saying it. I think maybe because I had this innate curiosity about the world around me, especially nature. I became a biologist, and I grew up in a small town in Maine with lots of trees. My mother was from Sweden, and she really encouraged us to be out in nature and explore, and I had an incredible view of the stars. So something about all of those things combined, I think, must have ignited that passion, and I never said anything else since.
Hello, International Space Station. My name is Caleb. My question is, what does a typical day aboard the International Space Station look like? And how does it compare to the training you performed on Earth?
Hi, Caleb. It's nice to hear from you. Our typical day on the International Space Station starts at 7:30 in the morning and ends at around 7:30 in the evening. We start and end our day with a planning conference with the ground control teams because you can't do anything on the space station without the tens of thousands of people that support us around the world, both in developing the science experiments that we do and keeping the systems operational here on the space station. So we spend our days partially doing science experiments and partially doing maintenance. Humans have lived up here on the International Space Station for over 25 years now. So we've got a lot of equipment that we need to keep updated and maintained, and there's no plumbers or electricians on call. It's got to be us that does all the work in concert with all the large ground teams that are supporting us from the various control centers around the world. So we spend our day going from task to task, switching around, sometimes doing science and sometimes doing maintenance. And hopefully there's those days we get to do spacewalks too.
Hi, my name is Megan. My question is, what are some of the most complicated repairs on a space station, and how do you fix them in simple terms? Thank you.
I think some of the most complicated repairs that we do are what Jack just mentioned when we're doing spacewalks. Everything becomes more complicated when you're working in the vacuum of space, and you have to do all of the work in these spacesuits where you're pressurized and you have a lot of mass, you lose your dexterity in your hands with these cumbersome gloves on. And so when we go out there to do repairs, they're really important and they can be quite difficult. Spacewalks are the most challenging and riskiest thing that we do, but they're also a lot of fun. So we really look forward to them and the repairs that we do out there. Inside the space station, one of the more complicated pieces of equipment, if you believe it or not, is actually the toilet. So we do a lot of maintenance to that because, of course, that's incredibly important to keep on running.
Hi, my name is Darren. My question is, how is medical care provided to scientists living on the International Space Station?
Hi, Darren. We provide medical care to each other, really. We have, sometimes we have a medical doctor on the crew, but often we don't. We just have people with various types of medical experience in their background. And we also have quite a bit of medical training that we receive while we're training to come up and be a part of an expedition to the International Space Station. We're also supported by incredible teams of doctors and nurses and medical technicians on the ground that can write procedures for us and tell us which medicines we need to give and how we need to give it, or what type of procedure that we need to do. We actually do quite a bit of research on humans while we're up here, from ultrasounds to blood draws, to kind of figure out how the human body operates in microgravity, because there's still pieces of it that we don't fully understand. So between all that medical training and expertise, we feel like we're pretty well taken care of while we're up here.
Hi, my name is Nico. My question is, what type of mathematics do you use when working on the International Space Station?
Hey, Nico, that's a great question. Mathematics is an important thing to learn for engineers and people in all walks of society. Up here on a daily basis as an astronaut at the International Space Station, we don't use a whole lot of sit down and do any types of calculations, but we heavily rely on engineers and ground teams on the ground that are doing careful analysis on all the bolts we tighten, on all the things that we install, the repairs that we make, to make sure things are structurally sound and that they're going to hold up to the loads that we experience up here on the International Space Station as we orbit the Earth. So why astronauts themselves in their daily work, we rely on a lot of other people to do a lot of the heavy mathematics that we need to do in order to accomplish our job safely.
Hi, my name is Jacob. My question is, what effect does living in space do to your body when you return to Earth?
Well, this is actually my second flight, so I know exactly what it feels like to return to Earth after a long time in space. I was up here for 7 months on my previous mission, and I can tell you coming to Earth doesn't feel great. When I came up here, I actually adapted quite quickly. I felt at home. Some people experience some space motion sickness. They feel a bit queasy or nauseous when they come up here for a few days. Everybody adapts within a few days. But I would say pretty much everybody really doesn't feel great when you come back. You know, you are just used to this offloaded environment with your bones and your muscles, and you're floating around, and so suddenly you feel these forces pressing down upon you, and it makes you feel pretty tired for quite a while. At first, when you come back, you're kind of like a drunken sailor wandering around a little bit. The neurovestibular system, our inner ears and our systems that we rely on for our balance and our spatial awareness, really go a little bit haywire when we come up and go down, because because they're dependent on gravity, and so their function is significantly altered up here in microgravity, and then when we come back down to Earth again and it's subjected to gravity once again, things go a little bit haywire. So I didn't feel great when I first came back. I mean, relatively I felt okay, but you feel tired, and then, after a couple days you're walking normally again, and then it takes a little bit longer to run again, more of a complex motor neuron interaction there. And I had some lingering back pain for many months. When I would get up off the couch or something, I would feel really, really stiff because, your body, all these muscles are just not used to those postures after you've been in space for so long. I had a saying when I came back, and it was, gravity is overrated.
Hi, my name is Logan. My question is if you could have anything engineered to make your life better on the space station, what would it be?
Better on the space station, what would it be?
Hi, Logan. That's an interesting question. There's lots of things that could make our lives a little better, but one of the big challenges on a day-to-day life here is the absence of running water. It's hard to wash your hands. It's hard to take a shower because we can't just have water like we normally do in a shower or sink back home. So if you can invent a way for us to step into a room to have running water for a little bit of time frame, that would be awesome, and I would support that here on the International Space Station.
Hi, my name is Braden, and my question is that I want to be a welder. How does welding work in space?
Here in space, there's actually an interesting phenomenon called cold welding, and in the vacuum of space, clean metal surfaces will actually instantly bond together even without heat. So this is something that, of course, doesn't happen on Earth, and it actually caused a problem with some of the early satellites. When we were developing and sending up our first satellites, engineers hadn't really predicted this, and of course it could cause a problem with different components of satellites. Welding, the actual process of welding, has only been done about 3 times in space, once in the late 60s by Soviet cosmonauts, in the 70s on an American space station, and then only 1 time in the open environment of space, in the vacuum of space, and that was in 1984 by some Russian cosmonauts again. We haven't done any welding since then. So it would be really interesting if you have any ideas of experiments that we can conduct, because we have done some experiments up here on the space station to look at materials and some relevant properties, but we haven't actually done any actual welding here on the space station.
Hi, my name is Chris, and my question is, after International Space Station is decommissioned, what is our next plan to expand our space exploration?
Hi, Chris. I love questions about the future. The International Space Station, as we mentioned, has had humans on it for over 25 years now, and it's coming close to its decommission date. Though we're not exactly sure when the end is going to be for this great set of modules. After that, we might have the opportunity to have commercial companies provide space stations in low Earth orbit. And of course, NASA's focus is going to be on going to the moon to stay and going to Mars and beyond. So there's lots of really exciting things going on in the future of human spaceflight. The International Space Station is not going to be the end of the line. It's one of the first steps as humanity goes out into the stars to explore even more.
My name is Alex. My question is, what is the hardest part about working without gravity?
I think one of the hardest things, but also one of the most enjoyable things, is the fact that everything just floats like this. So sometimes that's a lot of fun because I can just hold the microphone like this, or I can, pass an M&M to Jack from across the module. But it also does make things more difficult because it's very different for our brains in those first few weeks to learn how to operate effectively. In gravity, you're always on Earth with gravity. You're used to just putting something down on the table. You're used to navigating around because everything is relative to down. Right and left is relative to down because of the force of gravity. Up here, when you first arrive, when you put things down, you tend to lose them all the time because I have a drink of my water and then I put it down over here, but then I spin around and my head's up where Jack's is, and did I put my water over there, over here, over here? We have so many different surfaces, and as you can see, stuff everywhere. So just learning to work in that kind of environment is a little bit challenging and makes some everyday things a little bit more difficult.
Hi, my name is Ben.
My question is, are animals allowed on the International Space Station?
We don't have pets up here on the International Space Station at all. I mean, it could be fun, though. We've had some animal experiments while we've been up here that we use to learn more about physiology and biology that we can translate into our understanding of how the human body works. But someday humanity is going to live up here permanently in a way that we can have our normal things on life, like our favorite cats and dogs and other pets.
Thank you to our astronauts on the International Space Station for sharing your time, stories, and insights today. This has been an unforgettable experience, and we hope it's inspired everyone to think differently about what's possible and how STEM can shape our futures. On behalf of the University of Missouri Pre-Employment Transition Services Program, thank you to all the students, teachers, families, and community members who joined us for the downlink.
Thank you so much. It was really wonderful seeing your faces here today and bringing you up to the space station with us for a little bit of an adventure. Thank you for the great questions, and we wish you the best of luck.
Station, this is Houston ACR. Thank you. That concludes our event.
Thank you to all participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.